Hello, I'm Kristen Oaks-White.
And I'm Avery Davidson. Thank you for joining us for This Week in Louisiana Agriculture. There is now a new piece of legislation before Congress to help Louisiana farmers and ranchers. Co-authored by Louisiana Congresswoman Julia Letlow and Mississippi Congressman Trent Kelly, the Farmer Assistance and Revenue Mitigation Act, or FARM Act for short, would provide farmers with financial assistance due to high input costs and low commodity prices.
That bill is badly needed, especially because Congress has allowed the extension of the 2018 Farm Bill to expire, and there is no safety net in place for farmers and ranchers. To learn more about the situation facing Louisiana agriculture, U.S. Senator Bill Cassidy visited a sugarcane farm in West Baton Rouge Parish. At Travis Medine's farm, Cassidy saw how farmers cut sugarcane and even took a ride in the harvester. Following the farm tour, Cassidy met with Louisiana Farm Bureau members to discuss the need for Congress to pass a new farm bill and the need for supplemental assistance through legislation like the Farm Act. Louisiana Farm Bureau President Richard Fontenot says with the election season coming to an end, it's now time for Congress to take action.
I think Congress is going to be receptive to the challenges we have. And first off, we don't have a viable farm safety net in place, i.e. the Farm Bill. We're not sure when those are going to be put together and the bipartisanship efforts can come in and get something conclusive that's economically viable for our producers to use. In short of that, in that timeline, the Farm Act is another tool supplemental that's being discussed. So I think there's some strength in those conversations. I think there's some bipartisan effort that'll be generated here in the lame duck session. So hopefully our producers can have those resources to take to their lenders and put crops in 2025.
Those things need to be addressed. And for it not to be addressed in a farm bill is really kind of frustrating because we're still having to do the work, but we don't have that safety net that we feel is sufficient. So we need something sufficient, we need something that works, we need something updated. That's my biggest message, is to just have something updated. Let's stop with the extensions, let's address the issues that need to be addressed, and let's move on. Because without food security, you don't have national security. And that's something that I don't think enough people realize.
Congress returns to session on November 12th, exactly 1 week after the election.
Immediately following the town hall meeting with Louisiana Farm Bureau members in West Baton Rouge Parish, we had a chance to speak with Senator Bill Cassidy about what he learned from those farmers and ranchers and what he plans to do once he's back in Washington, D.C. Well, the meeting just wrapped up with Louisiana Farm Bureau members speaking with U.S. Senator Bill Cassidy. Senator, thank you so much for joining us on This Week in Louisiana Agriculture. What was it like in there?
Great. You know, my job is to listen to the people I represent. And if you will, people's job is to present their issues. Very respectful. This is our issue. Farm Bill was front and center. What are we going to do about the Farm Bill? Because many of them fear that farms will start going bankrupt if we don't get a Farm Bill through. And they made that message loud and clear.
November 6th will be a new day for the United States for sure. What's it been like being back home here in Louisiana? And what do you think the move's going to be like when you head back on November 12th?
Well, tell me which party wins. If Republicans win, we're going to be pumped. And if we lose, we're going to be, oh my gosh. So it's almost, you can't predict that. But the greatest thing about going around Louisiana is you find how great Louisianians are. You know it, but then you see them being resilient, being persistent, being creative, making money, employing people, getting jobs. The greatness of our country isn't the government. The government just fundamentally sometimes doesn't work. But the American people work. And so the good thing about going around our state, and I've been around the whole state the last month, you see our state working, our nation working. That gives me optimism for the future.
Louisiana Farm Bureau President Richard Fontenot presented you with the Friend of Farm Bureau Award. Senator Bill Cassidy, thank you so much for being with us and for helping us with agriculture.
Thank you.
So there you have it. I'll send it back to myself and Kristen in the studio.
For the third year in a row, Louisiana is facing drought conditions. Brittle, dry land is the antithesis of agriculture, with many farmers frustrated over the lack of rain.
Those dry conditions are great for one thing, though: wildfires. TWILA's Josh Meeks takes a look at how one ranch north of Baton Rouge had a very close call.
Over here, the trees fell over here, and back behind us, there's no fence. As a cattle rancher, Amelia Kent is quite dependent on fences.
I mean, this hits too close to home.
She's surveying the damage after a recent wildfire took out this section of fence, potentially putting her cattle in danger of escaping where they could wander into traffic.
We're quite fortunate in that the only damage we sustained was in the form of a fence row. We don't have the timber property that was primarily impacted by the fire. However, our pasture is adjacent to that timber property, and our perimeter fence was quite literally burned up for at least a stretch of at least a half mile.
The fires that took out her fence were two wildfires that merged into one. At least one of those blazes was ignited by a chain hanging from a truck.
Thankfully, the winds were mild and working against it. So this really is more just a wake-up call than a terrible event. Some timber properties impacted. We have a lot of dead trees as a result of last year's drought. So that coupled with our dry conditions right now is creating more of a tinderbox situation than we would typically have in a pine belt area.
Southeast Louisiana hasn't seen any substantial rainfall since Hurricane Francine. Dry conditions have triggered another drought, and coming off of 2023, that's something the new state climatologist is watching closely.
As everybody knows, hardly a drop of rain during the month of October anywhere in the state except for down in the extreme southeastern part of the coastal parishes. So for the most part, we're rolling into drought, not looking for any big changes anytime soon. And particularly in northern and western Louisiana, things are getting pretty critical there in terms of moisture shortage.
You can't make rain, but you can devote more resources to study it so that farmers and ranchers facing drought conditions can get emergency aid in a more timely manner.
We've got a team now, a drought monitor teams composed of about a half a dozen people, includes both federal, local, and academic input. And keep in mind that the definition of drought changes depending on who you talk to. So it's not an easy solution. It's not simply a matter as rainfall up or below normal. And so we're looking at a variety of different parameters to analyze it. We're doing a better job of tracking all of those weather elements. So we believe that the drought monitor is much more timely, much more up to date than it had been in the last two summer and fall seasons.
In the meantime, folks like Amelia Kent will have to rely on the hard work of state and local firefighters, as well as fire prevention crews with the Department of Agriculture.
Quite thankful. My daughter and I left this property at 7:30 last night, and where we're standing at Department of Ag, Dozer was still patrolling and working on this area from a preventative and containment standpoint. Not that the fire was out of control, but preparing and controlling for any flare-ups overnight.
Reporting from north of Baton Rouge for This Week in Louisiana Agriculture, I'm Josh Meeks.
Kent says her neighbors were the first to arrive and help get the fire under control, and she's thankful they were there. The rest of the fence will have to come down before it can be rebuilt. Kent says her anxiety over the rest of her fields will stay high until they get a thorough drenching.
Jay Grimes was also recently on an episode of the Farm Bureau podcast, talking with Agriculture and Forestry Commissioner Dr. Mike Strain. Strain says many farmers are still battling the aftermath of last year's record drought.
Like with crawfish, that'll take several years. That is not something you can do in 1 year, because we have to reestablish those crawfish in more than 100,000 acres, reestablish them in the wild population in the basin. But then again, it takes several years to reestablish that. And so our farmers took a pretty big lick last year.
You can listen to Commissioner Strain and State Climatologist Jay Grimes' full episode on the drought right now, wherever you get your podcast. Well, if you've traveled a lot in Louisiana, you know that there are a lot of pine trees, and while they can all look the same, there's a lot going on under those needles.
As TWILA's Neil Melancon shows us, Louisiana has one of the most biodiverse areas in the world.
It's a beautiful morning in Kisatchie National Forest, and this group of loggers and forestry personnel are not only out here to enjoy it, but get an education as well. They're here to learn about the good forestry management practices that not only increase native wildlife and biodiversity, but provide for a rural economy. And it all starts with these pine trees.
We're trying to restore the native longleaf forest that was here for, tens of thousands of years. And a lot of that's gone now. And now we're trying to bring some of that back. And logging is very much an important part of what we do to help manage this ecosystem.
Pryor says while long blocks of pine trees may not look like much, they support one of the most biodiverse areas in the world.
The longleaf ecosystem is the second most diverse ecosystem behind the rainforest. And people don't realize that, but when you look at all the grasses and the different plants and the insects and the animals that live out there, that's what makes it so complex.
The wildlife that uses them is a sign of a healthy forest, and while we were out here, the news came that the red cockaded woodpecker was moved up a grade from endangered to threatened. That's in no small part thanks to the efforts of foresters who have used relocation and artificial nests like these to make this a literal breeding ground.
You got a ready-made home for a red cockaded woodpecker, and they'll use that. So we've been able to increase the population. That way you get the habitat in good shape, you thin the forest and burn the forest to where it manages the understory.
Like Shively says, burning is a great tool for use in the understory as it clears out competing loblollies and other invasives. Good forestry practices are another, and that's why logger Tony Elliott is here to get a better feel for the practices used.
It's like it's a big garden. And you gotta thin the bad stuff out, and we use that for toilet tissue and paper. The lumber we use to build houses, you're gonna need it, for everybody needs lumber.
The public-private partnership here in Kisatchie has led to both the preservation of species and commercial use. And while not everyone likes snakes, the Louisiana pine snake has also benefited. This highly endangered Louisiana native is non-venomous, but helps keep down the rodent population, which also threatens birds and crops. Forestry is a key part of this species' survival.
Trees are like people. They hit a certain age, their productivity goes down. So we keep the forest healthy and better prepared for disease or insect outbreaks by keeping the forest thinned and the different habitat requirements for the different species that we're managing for.
Now, while the Louisiana pine snake may not be everyone's cup of tea, it does represent a healthy ecology, and that ecology can support wildlife, agriculture, forestry, and commercial interest if we're smart about it. Reporting from the Kisatchie National Forest near Woodworth, I'm Melancon.
Now, if you'd like to follow those eagles online, and who wouldn't, or if you want to find out more about Louisiana's wildlife, we'll have some links over on our website at twilatv.org. Still to come on TWILA, a very important field day for these children to get them out of the books and do some hands-on learning.
But first, Louisiana agriculture through the eyes of Italian immigrants. The final chapter of our special report is after the break.
You're watching This Week in Louisiana Agriculture, the only TV show bringing Louisiana farmers and consumers together every week.
October 31st marked the culmination of Italian American Heritage Month, and TWILA has been looking at agriculture through the eyes of those Italian immigrants.
In the third and final chapter of our special coverage, correspondent Suzanne Ferreira uncovers the challenges as well as the futures of those Italian descendants.
This is small, but tomorrow it'll be ready to harvest. That's how fast it grows.
Witnessing the fruits of their labor from seed to stalk, as well as the cyclical rebirth of their bounty, is an intangible gift unlike any other.
You feel blessed and you feel joyful. You feel a sense of success by just growing off the crop.
The joy is to see things grow and harvest it and sell it. That's the joy.
From little seeds, they get 6 foot high and produce so much tomatoes, you couldn't believe it.
These Italian and Sicilian Louisiana farmers feel a profound sense of joy and fulfillment from Mother Nature's glory.
This is God's heaven right here. We live on God's green earth. That the land is so rich and it makes the fruit so good and delicious.
I love it because it's so peaceful.
But that farming nirvana comes with a price, one perhaps inconceivable to the consumer.
Farming now is a lot of moving parts that no one would understand. The consumers have no clue.
All work.
Work.
All work, no play.
Work.
When you say work, I mean, you're getting emotional about it.
Well, that's all I would do.
You got to work hard to really enjoy this.
Their immigrating ancestors worked their fingers to the bone the moment their hands dug into Louisiana soil. However, evolution has taken place.
It's more issues than farming. Farming now is not the issue. Those poor people, they had issues. Now we don't have that issue. We can farm.
So what is the
turning a profit? That's the issue.
Consequently, Anthony Liuzza has continued to slowly chisel away his farming acreage over the past 8 years. While he has the ability to produce spring, summer, and fall crops on 750 acres, he's only utilizing about 100.
I think if my father was here today, he would have told me to, I can hear him now, son, you know, you need to slow down. Things are not going in the right direction, okay? You need to slow down a little bit, but slow down never was for him, and slow down has never been for me.
Steep overhead expenses and regulations continue to take a toll on their resources.
Some of these farmers have so much debt that the banks are telling them, we're not going to finance this crop. We'll finance that crop, but we're not going to do this crop.
In the farm business today, you're probably on the H-2A program. That's a federal grant program. The problem with that program is that it's hard to get them to come from Mexico to come to the United States. It costs the farmer anywhere from $2,000 to $3,000 to bring him from Mexico to come to your farm.
And there's no avoiding the hefty price tag for necessary equipment.
A tractor like that backhoe is $100,000. That truck that's being loaded up right there is $140,000.
And what happens under the sky, ruled by Mother Nature, is another obstacle, a challenge beyond human control.
No more hurricanes. I hope I never ever see another hurricane. That's what I'm hoping for.
With Katrina, they had 8 foot of water in that house. I lost everything I owned, everything. I probably lost $150,000 to $200,000 worth of machinery.
While Liuzza's sons have their hands in farming, the unpredictabilities and unavoidable challenges have forced the family to diversify.
See, they're different colors. Mm-hmm. This one's light yellow, these are bright yellow.
Nestled amid the Liuzza farmland are the Greenery and the Berry Barn, two popular wedding and event venues owned and operated by Liuzza's daughter-in-law, Elizabeth.
It is the best kept secret. I've heard that over and over again.
In addition to agro-tourism projects, she also runs the family-friendly Liuzza Land, where visitors can pick their own produce.
The cone in it is amazing.
Liuzza's sister Cindy is co-owner of Berrytown Produce with locations in Hammond and Ponchatoula. Both markets sell seasonal Liuzza produce. They also offer a plethora of items from Louisiana specialty products, house-made to-go meals, to plate lunches.
I'm that farmer's daughter that we make the best of whatever we have. So if something comes in, there's going to be no waste.
She also pioneered Salad Station, which continues to spawn franchises throughout the country.
This is a big crop.
Deep in Belle Chase, Joe Renazza's Star Nursery citrus tree business is thriving.
I got all my faculties. I have my good mind. I'm still able to walk around, still supervising.
What does the future hold for Renazza Farms?
Well, my daughter and her husband is taking the farm over because I'm a senior citizen plus. I'm 80 years old.
His daughter, Dawn, the 5th generation, is already carrying that torch.
I was the son my daddy never had. I always was by his side from little, and I worked with my grandpa, and they just trained me from young. And when my grandfather passed away unexpectedly, I finished out the school year and came back to the farm.
The priming began long before her grandfather's passing.
You didn't play around. He was always, everything needed to be fast, 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 and I probably have a lot of that in me, that everything, you're not working fast enough. Come on, let's go. Let's pick up the pace. Let's work a little faster.
Yeah, we got all kind of trees here.
But there's no one standing by to take the reins on the Gallo farm in Kenilworth. 88-year-old Johnny Gallo is the last man standing of the Gallo farm empire.
I'm out. This is gonna be my last year. I figured a long time, 88 years old, digging in this mud, but I enjoy it.
Gallo's son, who worked hard in the field with him for years, chose a different career path. And his daughter, Lindsay, who loved farming, passed away at the tender age of 15 of cancer.
I can see her out there in the field right now. Close my eyes and look at her in the field, helping me. That's the kind of person she was. And I talked to him as, Lindsay, I said, if you was here, I know you help me. I'll pray. I pray to the Lord. I see what he's done here for me.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee.
It's that unshakable faith and unwavering bond of blood carried from the mother country more than 100 years ago by their farming ancestors that has survived the passage of time and is so powerful that it's everlasting. What is it that's keeping you alive?
My grandbabies.
Your grandbabies. The future.
The grandbabies.
Fortunately, Louisiana has been able to downsize without feeling a great financial pinch. Avery, Kristen.
Well, I know that over the generations they've had to make many sacrifices, and this is very personal for you. What was the thing through this process that really surprised you?
It was an awareness. My grandfather sold their ancestors' produce in the French market, and now I know why I was always drawn to the farm, to the field, when I did stories over the last 30 years.
Well, I'm so glad that you were drawn to those stories. Thank you so much,
Thank
Susan
y'all.
Ferreira.
Excellent. Still to come on TWILA, the fast food farm has nothing to do with McDonald's, but to these kids, it's just as fun. Stay with us.
Getting kids outside and putting their hands in the dirt, it sounds a lot like, back in my days, one of those speeches, but it really is crucial to understanding agriculture.
That's exactly what St. James Parish Farm Bureau has been inviting kids to do now for nearly 20 years. At its annual Parish Ag Day, kids get to see farm animals, explore growing fields, and even sow seeds for future crops. Fast Food Farm's Executive Director Denise Email says not only does it teach them where their food comes from, but how to take care of the land for generations to come.
It could be environmental, where they're learning how to protect our watershed. It can be so many different topics. We try to do a lot that connects with some of the plots we have out here naturally, because we want them to be able to see it within. So today in the pizza garden and the taco tent, they're going to be able to sprinkle wheat seeds to start planting the wheat for the crust for the pizza.
Email says they had about 500 students come through this year. Well, that does it for this edition of TWILA. Be sure to join us next week when we'll show you why we need a passage of the Farm Act and a farm bill now.
Until then, you can watch all of our stories online at twilatv.org. Be sure to like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and subscribe to our TikTok and our YouTube channel. Turn on those notifications. That way you know when we put something new out there.
For all of us here at TWILA, thanks for joining us. We hope to see you again right here next week.